Let me start off by saying that this is not about the Hebrew Israelites. If you're somebody who has your issues with them, then that's fine. But understand, the same way that I told you that the whole R. Kelly thing is not about R. Kelly, Bill Cosby wasn't about Bill Cosby, it's about white supremacy launching an all-out offensive against black people, black men in particular. That's what this is about. The Hebrew Israelites are being used as basically a case study. White supremacy is making it clear that they are now about to start formally going after black voices on the internet. Whether you agree with the Hebrew Israelites, whether or not you think they're right, whether or not you like what they do is irrelevant. The point is, they are a non-sanctioned black voice, and the white media is using them as a template. These guys get out there, they say some pretty loud stuff, they say some pretty off-the-wall stuff, they're pretty controversial. But then again, all black people who don't agree with white supremacy are controversial. But if you look at what the white media decides to hone in on as what they don't like about the Hebrew Israelites, you find that it conveniently dovetails with everything that they also don't like about the new voices of black media. Remember, this is not about the Hebrew Israelites. They're using them as the thin end of the wedge. These guys get out there, they're loud, they're speaking strongly, they're calling people names and such, and the white media looks and goes, see, that's how these new voices are. They're not responsible. They're not like the old black media. They're not like the responsible Negroes in the Congressional Black Caucus. Well, these guys say that they don't like homosexuality and they have a problem with white rule. Oh, something must be done. The same way that the white media has been using their media monopoly in order to try to make black men into the face of sexual harassment and assault, so as to get attention off of the white males who actually are the face of sexual harassment and sexual assault. They're using their media to try to prop up the next media offensive. We've been speaking out against these bastards, and we've been having an impact. So what they're doing is they're laying the groundwork for how they intend to come against us. It's going to start off with the Hebrew Israelites, and next thing you know, they're going to segue to, there are these other voices over there. They may not stand on street corners, but a lot of stuff that they say kind of dovetails with these Hebrew Israelites. That's how these guys operate. They're going to choose one in particular to hold them up as the bad nigger figure, and then they'll turn right around and say, and all the rest of you, you're no better than them, so we're going to first of all come up with the means to go after these niggers over here, these loud guys in these outfits. And then that's going to become the new rules for how they go after anyone and everyone, because they don't have a means to counter what we say. I'm going to break down the Washington Post's article about the Hebrew Israelites. This came out just today. Now, for the last couple of days, people have been hearing about the protest on Capitol Hill in front of the Lincoln Monument, and you had these Donald Trump supporters who were taunting Native Americans who were there, and it led to a standoff, and everybody's like, oh, just another case of Donald Trump's very fine people deciding that some non-whites need to be put on notice and disrespected. And that's how it was for a while, but the white media was like, whoa, we don't want white folks to get too at each other's throats, so we need to find a way to throw some niggers in there. Next thing you know, who are the black Israelites at the center of the viral standoff at the Lincoln Memorial? Wait a minute. The Hebrew Israelites were at the center of it? There were only like 4 or 5 of them there, and they were not the ones who were up in anyone's faces. They were standing off to the side. How the hell are they at the center of it? Well, this is where the white media's got to explain things to you, because if you look at it, clearly the Hebrew Israelites were not the ones who kicked this off. They were not at the center of anything, so the white media needs you to listen to them as they spin their fairy tale for you. Now, I'm going to be quoting liberally from this article, but just understand, this is supposed to be the so-called liberal media, and this is what the liberal media has to say about black people. In the initial media churn, they were nearly missed, but a small band of Hebrew Israelites, members of a historic but little-known American religious movement, may actually be at the center of a roiling controversy that has gripped the nation in recent days. It began with a now viral video clip filmed Friday at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington. The clip was widely understood as being centrally about the dangers of Trumpism, and the teenagers who were taunting the Native Americans were condemned. But a longer video soon bubbled to the surface, widening the lens. There we go. There goes that. The same stuff you hear from the right wing. Whenever black people will be killed, they say, well, we don't have all the facts yet. Now you got your good liberals saying the same thing. Well, we didn't have all the facts, you see. It showed how a group of half a dozen Hebrew Israelites had in fact been goading and preaching at both the Native Americans and high schoolers, using profanity and highly provocative language for nearly an hour. So the video showing the whites and the Indians facing off, that's not the real story. The real story is there were some niggers who were over there, and apparently they were using some indelicate language. See what they did there? The Hebrew Israelites were not part of the standoff. They were standing off to the side. That's what they were doing. They weren't in the standoff. They were standing off to the side. But the white media is telling you, no, they were in the very center of it. They have no evidence of it, but they're telling you that, so you're supposed to just buy it. And then they go on, and this is where the white media gets very interesting. I'll tell you black folks something. You don't know anything about your enemy. You wonder why it is that Professor Truth spends so much time learning the history of these bastards, finding out where their movements originate, who are their leaders, their ideological forebears and progenitors. It's because of the fact that you can't defeat your enemy unless you know your enemy. And the Washington Post put this up basically to show black folks, yeah, we may not have talked about you guys, but let us show you just how much we know about you. That's what this article is meant to do. It's meant to be a shot across the bow to make it clear, yeah, you voices on the internet, you black voices who do not speak up about how black people need to embrace homosexuality, and you're not going for the white okey doke and the intersectionality crap. Yeah, we've heard you. You've been influencing too many black people. Even if you as individuals don't agree with each other on everything, the point is as an aggregate, all of these voices who refuse to toe the white line, who refuse to let white media just rule the day, you guys have been influencing too many black people. Too many black people have been listening. And maybe it's not even a matter of do they follow the new voices of black media. The question is, are they following white power? And too many black folks are starting to veer off. So now it's a matter of, okay, white media is acting as the point man. We need to tell you, first of all, let's start the story off as always. Here's some dangerous Negroes over here. First, they're going to start off saying these guys are dangerous. They're dangerous. And then it's going to be, well, we need some legislation. Somebody needs to do something. To continue with the article, dressed in fringed black garb, some with scarves tied around their heads, they preached what to many were both abrasive and unfamiliar end-times messages, calling Native Americans literal descendants of the Israelite tribe of Gad, the white students cursed Edomites, and preaching that a nuclear apocalypse was around the corner. Now look at what they did there. They made it very clear, yes, we are familiar with what you guys are saying about white people being Edomites. This is the article just basically saying, yes, we're familiar with your rhetoric. We are familiar with these guys. They haven't said anything, but it's, as I keep telling you, just because they haven't mentioned us doesn't mean they don't know about us. They've been watching us for years. I personally know that they've been on to me for at least a decade. And any of the other prominent voices, the new voices of black media, they've been watching us too. And remember what I told you. These guys don't have a means to be able to counter us, but they still have an advantage as far as the administrative and enforcement arms of white supremacy goes, and that's where this is ultimately going to go to. They are laying the groundwork for that. And I also told you that we're not at a point yet where we're ready for a full-in-the-face, head-on confrontation with these bastards. That's part of the reason why they're moving now. As far as they're concerned, okay, maybe it's time for us to just go ahead and come at these new voices, these black people on the internet. Maybe the white media's looking, going, hey, maybe we just have to go ahead and bite that bullet. We may give them a larger profile, but if we use our power to be able to smash these guys, if we tell people how evil they are and how wrong they are, then hopefully we can smash them and everything goes back to status quo ante. That's what they're doing here. Now listen to the kind of research that the Washington Post has done about a group of black men who have, to the best of my knowledge, the Hebrew Israelites have never attacked anyone, unlike the alt-right. They've never run anyone over, unlike the alt-right. They've never killed anyone, unlike the alt-right. They've never started massive brawls in the street, unlike the alt-right. They've never called for anyone to be killed, unlike the alt-right. And yet, look what the Washington Post is doing. They decide it's time for a full court press against an organization who 99.9% of the people had never even heard of before today. The article says the 1970s and 80s saw the rise of an innovative new branch of black Israelism centered around an organization named the Israeli Tanakh School, known colloquially as One West, after its address on 125th Street in Harlem. The One Westers saw themselves as radical reformers of earlier generations of Hebrew Israelites who had gone astray. They were also early and eager adopters of new media. Let me repeat that for you, because the white media is letting you know what the problem is. They were also early and eager adopters of new media. So you had some black men who were getting their hands on new technology for media, new technology for communication, and they were eager adopters, which meant that these guys were technically proficient. You didn't have some black folks who were out there begging some white people to do it for them, or who were really sloppy both with their presentation and their execution. Instead, you had guys who got in on the ground floor. They were, because that's what the problem with the internet. The internet's basically, between porn and white supremacists, the internet's been on lock. But here you got some black men who apparently are carving out their own niche on the internet, and that's what the white media doesn't like. It's okay if the internet's dominated by porn and white supremacists. But if you got black folks who decide to get their hands on some cyber real estate, and they carve out their own niche and begin to grow that niche, now we got a problem. Now we got something that's got to be stopped. So they're telling you exactly what their problem is. This is in like the first 1/3 of the article. They were early and eager adopters of new media. The white media is letting you know this is what our problem with these guys is. This is what our problem with these guys is. And as if that wasn't enough, they go on to write, these people were the downtrodden of the earth, they argued, whose past hardships were the result of their having strayed from the commandments of God. Contemporary hardships facing these groups, such as poverty, police brutality, racism, and gun violence, could be overcome only when they recognized their forgotten history as Israelites. The white media didn't throw that in there just as happenstance. They did it because what they wanted to make clear is these guys are out here being very aggressive, and they're being very ultra and in people's faces, and their problem happens to be poverty, police brutality, racism, and gun violence. These tech-savvy, very motivated, and whenever you think about the Hebrew Israelites, you can't ignore the fact that these guys, when it comes to trying to get their message out, they've got no qualms about it. They're damn sure not bashful, and they're not doing a half-baked job about it either. When these guys do their videos and such, whether you like the content or not, you can't ignore the fact that these guys are actually trying to put something out there that hopefully will get people's attention, and it ain't going to be some ragtag kind of thing. You see, the problem that they got with guys like Louis Farrakhan and the Hebrew Israelites is, for the first time, they're seeing black men who are using religion for the sake of empowering their people. They're using religion as a political tool to empower black people. They're not telling them love their enemy, all the rest of it. They're using religion to say, black people, you are a special people. You are a people deserving of better. You have a right to your piece of the world. God wants you to win. They're using religion for black people's interest. This is exactly what Dr. John Henrik Clarke was talking about. Instead of letting Europeans use it as a tool of conquest and control against you, you use it as a tool of your empowerment and liberation. Whether you agree with all the things the Hebrew Israelites say or not, the white media is letting you know these guys are not using religion the way that we brought it to them. They're using religion to empower black people. They're using religion to embolden black people. They're using religion as a means of getting black people to stand up straight, step forward, and to compete for their piece of the world. That's the problem that they got. That's the issue that they see with the Hebrew Israelites. Because everything that they're seeing, this is the same kind of stuff that gets taught in the synagogues. As far as they're concerned, black folks ain't supposed to have empowerment. As far as white supremacy is concerned, black people ain't supposed to be doing this. Everybody else can use religion to empower themselves, but black people shouldn't. Only thing black folks need religion for is to learn how to serve your master. Whenever they tell you turn the other cheek, they don't tell anybody else that. They tell you turn the other cheek. They tell you be peaceful and pray for those who use you despitefully. They tell you that. Meanwhile, when they get together with themselves, it's eye for an eye. And they're seeing some black men who are using religion as a tool of empowerment, and they want it to stop because it scares them. Because black people, especially black men, ain't supposed to be doing this. The Washington Post goes on to write that leaders also embraced an apocalyptic worldview, teaching that the world would soon come to an end, ushering in a time when the Israelites would assume their rightful place as rulers and the white man's time would come to an end. Now, look at that. This is what the so-called liberal paper of record, the Washington Post, inside the Beltway, the newspaper that all the members of Congress and the president read. And look at what they call an apocalyptic worldview. The Israelites read black people would assume their rightful place as rulers, and the white man's time would come to a close. It's not an apocalypse. When they exterminated the people of Tasmania and the Carib Indians in the Caribbean, and they exterminated, all but exterminated, the Aborigines of Australia, wasn't that apocalyptic several times over? No, it was white people taking what they wanted and eliminating anyone who stood in their way. That's not apocalyptic. That's just hustling for yours. So look at what the white media calls an apocalyptic worldview. Black people being in charge. This is them telling on themselves. This is how bold they are about it. They're telling on themselves. Black people in the driver's seat, black people in charge, that is the end of the world. This is the white media telling you. They're saying it. They're putting it right in front of you. Black people in charge, that's the end of the world. That's the apocalypse. That is not the house of Israel saying that. That's not the Hebrew Israelites saying that. That's the white media saying that black people finally being in charge, that would be the end of the world. If white people aren't in charge, that's the end of the world. They put it for you there in black and white. And the Hebrew Israelites are preaching a doctrine that black people should be in charge. They're preaching a doctrine that black people have a right to their piece of the world and that the Bible empowers and entitles you to it. So using religion in order to push the idea of black empowerment, that's something they got a problem with. And if black people are in charge, or rather if white people are not in charge, that's the apocalypse. The house of Israel, the Hebrew Israelites, they've never said anything about the end of the world. They've never said anything about the whole world's going to be blown to smithereens. They never said anything about that. But the white media is saying if we ain't in charge, it's the apocalypse. Look what the hell they're doing. They're showing you exactly what their problem is. And it is not the occasionally salty language or the occasionally aggressive stuff that the Hebrew Israelites say. It's the idea that white people are not going to be in charge and that they're using the Bible to sanction that idea. That's the problem. The article, or hit piece I should say, goes on to say, in the 1990s and early 2000s, by the way, notice how they've been tracking things from the 70s all the way up till today. This is the white media trying to show you, yeah, we got a full dossier on you guys. And you'll find out who put that dossier together in a minute. We'll get to that. In the 1990s and early 2000s, doctrinal disputes and an end times prophecy gone awry caused the school to fracture several times. Today, there are at least a dozen organizations that have roots in the early One West school, with many other smaller groups or camps, as they are often called, drawing influence. Now, Now, look at that. They're letting you know, yeah, we know that you guys are broken up into organizations. They're showing we've been keeping this level of tabs on you. Not only do we know how you began, we also know that about 20 years ago you guys fractured, and we know how many fragments there are. They've been keeping an eye on the house of Israel and on those groups that splintered from it. This is what the white media is trying to show. They're trying to show, yeah, we got a full dossier on you, and look how detailed it is. We know everything that you guys been doing for the last 40 years. Now the white media decides it's time to talk about what a problem black men who don't toe the line are for the society and for media. It's time. Now they're getting to the point that they really wanted to get to. This is what the entire article was meant to just basically pretend to be about some sort of journalism, when actually now they're going to tell you this is the problem with black men being able to speak for themselves. If you don't have black men who are swishing their hips and wearing pink drawers and acting like a bunch of homos, or black men who are obsessed with chasing white women's drawers, or black men who are obsessed with trying to be anything other than black men standing in their own power. Here's the problem with it. In recent years, one Westers such as House of Israel have seen a huge boost in interest as a result of online outreach. Let me repeat that for you. In recent years, one Westers such as House of Israel have seen a huge boost in interest as a result of online outreach. There are thousands of videos on YouTube. There are thousands of videos on YouTube. Look at that. This is the white media letting you know. This is how we found you guys. There are thousands of videos on YouTube and dozens of Facebook and Twitter accounts dedicated to One West Hebrew Israelite messages. Now, they are not just mentioning that simply because. This is supposed to be a prelude to deplatforming. For those of you who don't know what that means, what it means is you got Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, who will all at once decide that anything related with fill in the blank has to be scrubbed from our network, has to be scrubbed from our website. That's called deplatforming. And that it happens across the board. It's not just one website that does it. It's the big social media sites decide that they're going to try to erase you from social media, which means to erase you from social consciousness. They've got a huge advantage. They've got a virtual monopoly when it comes to being able to reach people in large numbers. So as far as they're concerned, we need to make sure that people who say the wrong things, especially if you're questioning white supremacy, especially if you're repping anything that even smacks of black empowerment, and whether you like the Hebrew Israelites or not, get it through your thick skull. This ain't about the Hebrew Israelites. What is it that Tariq Nasheed likes to say? That to them, we're all one big nigger? Well, that's exactly what's happening here. If you're not out there repping black men wearing pink panties and black women getting out there being all butch, if you're talking about black people not being dysfunctional, black people not being erratic and haphazard, black people who are having their act together, who are in the driver's seat, and who are standing as heterosexual, strong black men and women, if you're repping that, then they got a problem with you. That's what this is about. It doesn't matter if you're out there doing some quasi-religious shtick or if you're out there doing some political scientific shtick. It doesn't matter what your particular angle to reach black people is. If you're not saying the right thing, you're a problem. And what's happened is, as I told you, a critical mass of black voices, whether they are united together or not, the point is a critical mass of black voices happen to be saying something that is getting enough black people looking in a direction other than the direction white supremacy wants. There are voices now that are reaching black folks who we have now, this is confirmation. The white media is confirming for us. You've reached the tipping point. We've been watching you for decades now, and it's at the point now where we fear that we can no longer ignore you because you're not going away. And what they're doing is they're reaching, this is the white media communicating with each other. I've told you about this for years. They use their media not merely to try to deceive and indoctrinate the people, but it's also how the white powers that be communicate to one another. And the message that they're sending is the major hubs of social media, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. These people need to be scrubbed. These people need to be erased. Now to continue. A related organization, Israel United in Christ, was also recently thrust into the spotlight after rap superstar Kendrick Lamar featured snippets of his cousin, one of its members, preaching on his Pulitzer Prize-winning album. Now look at that. Kendrick Lamar ain't part of the Hebrew Israelites or anything even associated with them, but his cousin is. And he decided that he was going to be repping. That's what the white media is looking going, see, this is the reason why Kendrick Lamar is so dangerous. This is them attempting to try to make the brother guilty by association. To continue, with an elevated profile, Hebrew Israelite groups such as House of Israel have received significant pushback from organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League, which brand them as hate groups for their inflammatory messages about white, LGBT, and Jewish people. But here's the part that got me. The Washington Post added on to that, as well as from Christian groups that see them as a growing religious threat. Really now? So there are Christian groups who see the Hebrew Israelites as a religious threat? So they don't see Jerry Falwell as a religious threat. They don't see Pat Robertson as a religious threat. They don't see white identity as a religious threat. Any of those white identity Christian movements as a religious threat. But they see the Hebrew Israelites as a religious threat. Is it that they see the Hebrew Israelites as a religious threat, or do they perhaps see the Hebrew Israelites as ideological competition? That they're facing a group who is not on board with the popularized, read, Anglo-white-centric Christianity. These guys are saying something different, whether you agree with it or not. The point is it's decidedly different than what Pastor Porkchop, Reverend Hamhock, Minister Hogmog with the chitlin juice running down his jaw is offering up on Sundays. The Hebrew Israelites talk very differently. So when the white media is sitting here saying Christian groups see them as a growing religious threat, what that means is they're going to be trotting out the old, decrepit black preachers who are going to say, y'all don't need to be listening to these angry voices. They ain't nothing but the work of the devil. Okay, well, what's the work of God? Pink panties and, well, you know, Sister Janice over there, she's taking a real shine to your sister over here. And well, ain't we supposed to be about love and what would Jesus do? This is the white media who's trying to lay the groundwork for a full-scale assault. And they're going to be using this as a paradigm for how they intend to do it. Same way that they did with Bill Cosby. What they did to Bill Cosby, they hope is going to be a usable working model for how they're going to be able to, like an assembly line, just like a machine, they're going to be able to start in on a black man who they want to see put in prison. Let's gin up a fake defamation campaign filled with lies based on nothing but unsubstantiated hearsay and nothing but a bunch of made-up statements from people who have no credibility whatsoever. People who just yesterday were saying that Bill Cosby was all right. Now they're going to say exactly the opposite, and we'll have a DA who's going to say, why, we have to prosecute, and so on. You know, it's going to be a machine. Well, here they are trying to work up the exact same thing. They're trying to manufacture a machine by which they can go after black voices in new media. They keep saying that over and over again. The Hebrew Israelites were early and eager adopters of new media. They've got thousands of videos on YouTube and dozens of Facebook and Twitter accounts. And that their surge in interest in them was the result of online outreach. White media is making it clear we got to scrub these guys from the scene, anything that it takes. And they intend to not only do this in terms of attempting deplatforming, because I think that's what's coming, that's what they're setting the stage for, but also it's a matter of, well, these guys started offline before they were online, so what we need some responsible black voices. Yeah, black people who are on the payroll, like the congressional black talkers, and these corrupt and crumbling black preachers who ain't done a damn thing for anybody. We need them to push back against these angry, irresponsible voices, these hate groups. They don't, now notice how they just smear these guys. They don't bring anything that might even remotely say, wait a minute, here's who these guys are and what they stand for. Nothing that actually says, here's why people would be interested in these guys. Let them speak for themselves. It's not as if the Hebrew Israelites won't talk to you. They'll talk to anybody who listens to them, and a lot of people who don't want to listen to them. So why didn't the white media talk to them? Same reason that the scumbags behind the R. Kelly mockumentary didn't bother to talk to Aaliyah's mother. Because this article is not about informing people. This article is about trying to dominate the public mind, trying to set up an image, a false image of the Hebrew Israelites, which they will then use as a pale brush to try to paint any and all black voices on the internet who ain't like Roly-Poly Martin, who ain't like Agent Duvernay, who ain't like Joy Reid. That's what this is about. Now, to close their little hit piece, they said, but as the scene of their preaching spread widely over the weekend, House of Israel members claimed they were not instigators and were not threatening any real violence. One Westers also claimed they are unfairly targeted by groups such as the Southern Poverty Law Center. The House of Israel presence at the Lincoln Memorial was, for the group, quite mundane, despite the flurry of attention. Indeed, Israelite street preaching in parts of D.C., Philadelphia, and New York is commonplace, a familiar, if odd, accent to city life. That's the Washington Post saying this, folks. The second most important newspaper in the United States. This is the Washington Post, along with the New York Times and a handful of other media outlets, mostly the big three media outlets, plus CNN if you want to throw them in. They are, as Dr. Noam Chomsky aptly put it, they are the agenda-setting media. Their job is to tell people what it is, the issue of the day to think, that you ought to be thinking about, and to tell you what you should be thinking about it. We're going to tell you what it is that you ought to be talking about, and we're also going to be telling you what you should think about it. We need to be focusing on these black Israelites. Why? They're a hate group. They're a hate group. That whole canard about trying to manufacture some black equivalent to the KKK, this has been a perennial delusion of white people for the longest time. They tried it with Nat Turner, tried it with Frederick Douglass, tried it with Booker T. Washington, tried it with Paul Robeson, tried it with Dr. King, tried it with Malcolm, tried it with the Nation of Islam, tried it with Farrakhan, tried it with any black man who does not show up and say, I just love getting beat up by white folks and I love racism and I ain't mad at nobody. If you don't say that, then you are a hate group, and that's the lie that they keep pushing. Oh, and on a side note, that Native American who that white kid was smirking in the face of, was mocking, his name is Nathan Phillips. It was hilarious because there was a Yahoo article where they quoted this Phillips character as saying that he felt like he had to get in between the Hebrew Israelites and these Trump white kids, even though the Hebrew Israelites were not trying to get to anybody. They were just standing their ground. And yet this guy tries to make it seem as if, they were about to come to blows. In that case, how the hell did he get between them then if they were about to come to blows? Little frail, raggedy thing that he is, he couldn't stop a freaking dandelion, much less some big, strong Hebrew Israelites who decided that they wanted to have a go at the Edomites. But this Nathan Phillips, and I nearly laughed till I died when he said that I had to get between them because I was seeing my country being torn apart. And I'm sitting here thinking, dude, if you are a Native American, a real one, not a $5 Indian, but if you really are a real Native American, I got news for you, Chief Running Mouth. Your country has already been ripped apart. It was ripped apart 150 years ago when the white folks decided to tear it up and divide it amongst themselves. See, this is the problem with the Native Americans. For those of you out there who still get dewy-eyed about them, the Native Americans, Dr. Claude Anderson was not being hateful at all or scornful when he told you the simple, simple historical facts. The Native Americans were neck deep in the slave trade. How do you think the good white folks were able to get in here in such large numbers? Yeah, there were a few Native Americans who might have resisted, but by and large, the Native Americans went along with it. What happened was they decided that they thought that they were going to get something out of it, and the only thing that they got out of it was damn near exterminated. And as you can see, there's a lot of them who are still ripe for an early grave the way that they're talking. They're talking about, I was watching my country. My country? That's as stupid as the Negro who likes to say, our astronauts, our nation's flag. But this is what passes for a Native American who the white media likes. They like a guy like this. They like a guy like this because he's not threatening white power. So that's what needs to be remembered here, folks. The Hebrew Israelites are not being targeted because there's some one-off. The white media is not just focusing on them. This is meant to be a prelude to the white media's attack on the new voices of black media, because that's what's coming next. They're using the Hebrew Israelites simply as the thin end of the wedge. They're going to get out there and demonize them and say, focus on all the cursing these guys. Oh, these guys are full of hate. The Southern Poverty Law Center says they're bad guys. And the ADL, why, we can't question the Jewish Anti-Defamation League. We can't question them. They say these are bad guys. Well, what makes them bad guys? Well, Didn't you read the Washington Post article? Didn't you see what it is that these guys have a problem with? What it is that these guys spend their time railing against? Why, these guys, they actually are just disparaging of what? Are they disparaging of decency? No. Are they disparaging of a man and a woman being committed to each other? No. What are they disparaging of? Well, they say all sorts of unkind things about LGBTs, and occasionally they're critical of Jewish people, and well, you should hear what they say about white people in general. Oh, you should hear what they say. These guys, this is just pure hate. What would Dr. King say? Okay, so if you're critical of white people, if you're critical of LGBT activity, if you're critical of people who happen to be Jewish, and they're not even, and by the way, the Hebrew Israelites are not even critical of Jewish people. They're simply critical of some things that some Jewish people have done and said. By and large, they are innocuous as you like when it comes to the Hebrew faith. In fact, they claim to be the Hebrews. How the hell are you going to take the people who claim to be Hebrews and say that these guys hate Jewish people? Jewish is a religion, not an ethnicity, or at least that's what it's supposed to be. We all know what the reality is. We all know what the reality is. But the problem you got with them is, well, look what they say about white people. Look what they say about LGBTs. Look what they say about quote-unquote Jewish people. Yeah, that ain't the real problem, or at least it's part of the problem. The real problem they got is, look what these guys say about police brutality. Look what they say about racism. Look what they say about gun violence against black people. Look what they say about the impoverishment, the systematic, deliberate, wholesale impoverishment of black people. That's the problem that the white media's got with what they say. You guys aren't accepting being oppressed. And you keep talking against police brutality, sooner or later you're going to start saying black people have a right to defend themselves from police brutality. And you're not going along with intersectionality, which means you're not allowing white power to be able to derange and be able to confuse the internal politics of the black community, because that's what intersectionality is about. Anybody who comes up to you and they're not just straight black first, what they're telling you is, we need to be schizophrenic as a group. That's what they're doing, like Kamala Harris. You'll have a woman who has been waging her own personal war against black people for over 20 years, allowing anyone who wants to kill black people to do so with impunity, and she'll protect them with the full force and power of the law. And yet she'll get in front of you and say that, well, everyone's interests should be represented equally. That's what the white media wants, which is they want a continuation of white power and privilege. This is not about the Hebrew Israelites. The white media is simply making a declaration that these guys are going to be the test case. Now look, we got issues and things that we differ on with one another. No group, no matter if they claim to all be on the same team or not, no group or subset of groups is going to agree on everything. Dr. William Mackey told us about this. We can differ on method, but we damn sure should not be in disagreement when it comes to the result, what it is that we want. I'm not telling you to get out there and put on the outfits that the Hebrew Israelites wear and to be calling white folks screaming, cursed Edomites in the streets. I'm not telling you to do any of that, but I am telling you that you better understand that as black folks, we can't allow for ourselves to be divided and conquered. Even if we disagree with each other, even on issues of principle, when we see white media, which is the propaganda arm of white supremacy, coming after one of us, we better understand that their MO ever since the first Europeans put their decrepit feet on African soil has been divide and conquer. And that's what they did, picking them off one at a time. They could never have taken Africa all at once. So what they did was they came in and picked us off one at a time. And instead of us standing together and hanging tough, which is the only thing that ever worked, take a look at what happened in the Congo with the Portuguese, if you want an example of that. Better yet, take a look at Northern Africa with what the Nubians did against the Arabs. It is when the Africans stood together, they won. But the problem is, it's been damned rare when we've done that. Too many cases, we are ripe for a fall because we fracture. I'm not telling you to get in bed with the Hebrew Israelites. What I am telling you is to be aware that this is white power, the white media, this is white supremacy doing what they've always done. They target some group of black folks and say, oh, well, this isn't all black people, it's just them over there. And instead of black folks saying, wait a minute here, first of all, even if you weren't going to come after me next, I see you going after black people, period. I'm not going to let that happen. Even if, let's just go ahead and separate the idea of let's separate the idea of black solidarity from this. Is it a good thing to just sit back and let white power go ahead and just pick some black group that it wants to pick off? Just let them select some group that they want to go in on, and we just sit back and go, oh well. At what point do we decide that we need to draw the line and that white power better stay on their side? They better stay on their side of the fence or else. That's what's happening here. They're testing us. They want to see what our reaction is going to be. They want to see if we're going to allow that to happen. You see, whether you agree with Minister Louis Farrakhan or not, you better understand when the white media takes shots at him, they ain't doing it just in isolation. He's being used as a proxy for all of us, the same way that the Hebrew Israelites are being used as a proxy for you and me. What the Hebrew Israelites represent, the doggone article sat there and said it in black and white. What they represent are black men who are eager and early adopters of new media. They are tech savvy and they are aggressive at getting their message out. And most of all, the biggest problem with the Hebrew Israelites is they have proven to be effective. They have been effective with their online outreach. They have been effective at making it where they tee up the people who they want to take down, to tee them up and make them cringe, tee them up and make them fear them. The Hebrew Israelites have proven themselves to be quite adept at that. And these guys have also proven that they're not letting in any doggone pink panty wearing high-heeled chumps. They're not doing any of that. They have their ideology and they're sticking to their guns about it. Now, you may disagree with that ideology, but what you cannot disagree with is the fact that the white media clearly has a problem with it. The Hebrew Israelites are proving that, apparently there's just enough of them who are making it clear. No, when white power comes along trying to figure out how do we co-opt this group, they're like, nah, we prefer our own company to yours. So do not let this pass by, just whiz by your head. When the Washington Post does something like this, you better believe this is not a one-off. This is the first shot across the bow. The Hebrew Israelites are being used as a proxy. This is not going to stop with them. This is a test case. They want to see how far they can get with it, because everything that they're saying about the Hebrew Israelites, everything that they're saying about these guys could easily apply to you and me. And that's deliberate, to keep that message, to use certain wording, to use certain words. And before it's all over, get ready to hear them saying, look at how they talk about women. They're so hateful they hate their own women. Even though the doggone Hebrew Israelites talk all the time about you can't have no woman but a black woman. But before it's all over, get ready to hear that, because that's going to be the line that they use. Everything you're hearing them throw at the Hebrew Israelites, you will hear and see it again, because they're going to be coming at us with it next time. Look at what they say. These guys rail against poverty, police brutality, racism, and gun violence. These guys have been critical of the white community, LGBT behavior, and Jewish people. Now, even though even though none of that happens to be true, it is true that the white media is trying to convince people of that. This is the line of rhetoric that they're going to use when it comes time for them to come at us. They're going to point to the Hebrew Israelites and say, look at these guys, so outrageous. Oh, it's obvious these guys are a hate group. Then they're going to say, and look at these guys over here. They may not be quite as in your face as the Hebrew Israelites. These guys might be a little more tactful, but they draw from the same well. This Professor Black Truth guy, I mean, has he embraced the LGBT lifestyle? Does he have anything good to say about intersectionalism? Well, has he ever tried a gay relationship? How would he know how? Does he? He just hates people. He's just full of hate. Expect for that to be used against the new voices of black media. Expect it. What is it that I've told you for the longest time? That under white supremacy, nothing, absolutely nothing happens in a vacuum. Damn sure not where the white media is concerned. They're not covering this simply because it was a slow Tuesday and there was nothing else to write about. They were doing that because, as far as they're concerned, they have now seen that some of these guys who are online are now occupying physical space. The messages that have been coming from black people, black men in specific, that have not been in line with the white supremacist dogma that has been attracting attention and gaining a following and gaining steam, they're looking and going, maybe we can't leave this alone. Maybe these guys are not just going to wither on the vine. We were hoping that if we ignored them, maybe their support would top out and then begin to taper off. But that's not happening. They just keep on building. They've seen the crowdfunding efforts. They have seen the crowdfunding from you guys. They have seen whenever the New Voices of Black Media do their podcasts and they do their live streams, they've seen the money that comes in. They've seen the support that you put behind it. You guys are out doing the freaking alt-right. You're out doing the white supremacists. And if black people who have the right message and the right ideas, if they're able to aggregate enough resources to inflict their will, white supremacy is going to find itself on the defensive real fast. You think that it's some kind of freaking accident that I put out my video about Kamala Harris on Monday and then the very next day you get this crap? My video about Kamala Harris, that video has already done over 25,000 views in less than 24 hours. Now, that may not necessarily be viral, but the point of the matter is it damn sure makes a blip on the radar. That's for damn sure. What it shows is that the message that's coming from black people who are not falling for the okie doke, black people who are not trying to be just slightly less odious versions of the old black media, it has cachet. It's got appeal. Black people are listening to it. You're listening to it. The video that I did about the whole surviving R. Kelly fraud, that video's gotten 134,000 plus views and counting. The white media knows that there are voices out here saying, don't fall for the okie doke, and they know that these voices are being listened to, and they need to find a way to give themselves cover to come after these voices. That's what they're doing here. They're trying to set a template for, these are the voices that are irresponsible. Oh, we tried to be patient with these guys, but the moment is just too dear. We have to do something. That's what this is about. They're giving themselves permission to do something that they've been wanting to do all along. We didn't go away. We have not reduced impotency or effectiveness. And because of that, now they're going to the old I'm white and I say so, white fiat. That's what they're prepping for. So I want you to take this one to heart. As black people, we got to learn what it means that when we see somebody coming at black folks, see the big freaking picture. If you allow whatever minor differences you may have with the Hebrew Israelites to be your reason to sit on your hands and let white supremacy take pot shots at them, then you're continuing the exact same sorry tradition of African apathy, which is what led to the slave trade in the first place. As black people, we're supposed to be especially hypersensitive when white power is attacking other black people, because they aren't doing it to protect us. When has white power ever tried to protect us? Oh, we got to go after R. Kelly. Why? To protect black women and girls. Really? So they care about black women and girls so damn much? Did they care when Thomas Jefferson was raping Sally Hemings? Did they care when Strom Thurmond was raping his concubine? Did they care when Daniel Holtzclaw was raping black women? When's the last damn time that they've actually given a damn? They haven't. It's just a clumsy front for the same old, let's find a black man who we can lynch in the media, lynch him in court, what have you. And can they get black people to either cheer them on or at the very least not oppose them? That's how lynchings went on for so long. The white media would find some black person that they wanted to demonize and say, well, old Cleophas over here, he put his hands on Miss Polly, and because of that we got to lynch that nigger. And black folks would be like, oh, well, if you say that's what he did, then, well, certainly he's a bad guy. Well, because we don't want white folks thinking that we're uncivilized, mind you. And they were like, these dumb niggers, they'll fall for anything. Okay, rinse and repeat, boys, rinse and repeat. Next thing you know, a few thousand dead black men and black women and black children later, you had Mary McLeod Bethune come along and say, wait a minute here. These are lies that these white folks are telling. And that's when somebody finally started questioning the lynchings. But it took that damn long? Yeah, because unfortunately, black people, we are all too willing to sit on our hands when white power comes along to go after some black person. I guess we figure as long as they're not doing a full-scale assault against all of us, never mind the fact that white supremacy's entire MO has always been picking off their enemy. They don't have the numbers to come at us in a full wave, so they got to pick us off, and they've been doing it for 500 years because we've been letting them. Don't you think it's about time that we stop falling for the okey doke? This is not about the Hebrew Israelites. This is about black people understanding when white supremacy has us in the crosshairs. Because today they're coming after the Hebrew Israelites, but I can promise you tomorrow they're going to be choosing some voices from the new voices of black media to go after. And all of the racist and racially coded language that you saw in here, where they're making it into a bad thing that black men are getting tech savvy, that black men are becoming eager and early adopters of technology, that black men are finding ways to use the internet in order to build a following. They portray that as being a bad thing. Oh, how dare they? They're saying that against the Hebrew Israelites today. Tomorrow, it's going to be us. And we need to make sure the white power gets put on notice, that the white media gets put on notice, that when we see white media, white power, white supremacy coming at black folks, we're going to put aside whatever freaking little differences we got, and we're going to circle the wagons for each other. Don't you think that that's an idea whose time has come again?